If you're thinking of switching schools, there are a few things you should consider first. Hi, I'm a music teacher and this is my life. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and welcome for those of you who might be new. This is the time of year where many teachers out there may be transferring or switching to different schools, and they may be in the applying phase, the interviewing phase, or they might be finding out whether or not they got accepted for a position at that new school. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 things that you should really consider before transferring to a different school as an educator. But before I jump into that list, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. The first thing that you need to consider, if you haven't already, is ask yourself, why do you want to leave your current school? If it's because of the administration, so for example, your principals or vice principals, at least in my school board, typically admin change schools every 4 to 5 years. And so I've been told by experienced teachers who have been in my school board for much longer than I have, that it's not worth switching schools because of your principals, because chances are your principals are going to need to change schools soon anyway. Teachers do not have that requirement of needing to rotate. So if you love your school, but it's just the admin, if you're able to stick it out, do your best to stay. If it's because you are looking for an increase in status, then that can definitely be worth it. So for example, I am a teacher who works part-time as a permanent teacher, and then the rest of my day is filled up with what is called LTO work. So those classes are things that I'm teaching this year, but I'm not guaranteed that amount of work every year. So if I were to transfer schools, and my list is actually going to be posted very soon of work that I can apply for, I would absolutely be willing to transfer schools if I was going to get an increase of my 0.5% up to 100%, because it means I would get an increase in how much I'm paid throughout the year and the summertime. If you're also thinking about teaching a different subject, then I would say that maybe transferring is good for you. If you love your school, you could let your administration know, hey, I'm thinking about teaching a different subject. I am qualified for that subject and this is what it is. Or if you're an elementary teacher, maybe you're considering other grade levels that you're qualified for. So maybe you're teaching grade 1 and you're thinking about wanting to teach grade 2. That can be a conversation or something that you submit to your administration for consideration prior to the following year's schedule being set. Now, sometimes there isn't that much wiggle room with teachables. So as an example, at my school, while I would love to be able to teach music, there are 2 teachers who are already at that school who have music as a teaching qualification. And because they have more seniority at that school than I do, they get first consideration for music courses. And so, for example, next year, I already know that they have not given me any music classes to teach. So I am teaching music outside of school in a junior choir context, and I can teach private music lessons. However, at my school next year, I know that there aren't going to be any music classes available to me. I could still lead the choir, but that is not technically part of my workload. I would be taking that on top of my workload since it is not considered a course. It would be something that runs at lunchtime or after school. So if your current school doesn't have any need, but you really want to get into a different subject, like for me, I'd love to have a music job, then yeah, you might be willing to transfer to a different school. If you are considering a leadership position, then yes, that can also be worthwhile to try and transfer. So for example, if you would like to be a department head, or if you're thinking of becoming a guidance counselor, particularly guidance counselors, these jobs don't always come up, and sometimes they come up infrequently. Headships or department head jobs tend to show up once every 4 or so years in my school board. It's a 4-year term. If you're really trying to get up in the ranks in terms of being a department head, or if your goal is to become a vice principal or principal in the future and you think that a headship would be worth it, then absolutely that can be a way of transferring to gain a new experience and maybe a little bit of a promotion. The second thing that I think every teacher should consider is their commute. Is it worth transferring to a different school if it's further away and the pay is the same? Well, only you can answer that question. If you're already a full-time teacher and you're transferring to another full-time job, but it's the job that you love, it's that dream subject or grade level, then sure, it can be worth it. But if you're only driving to a different school for the teaching subject, but you're only like part-time like me, you're at 50% and you're moving for another 50% or 67% or whatever, then it may not be worth it financially because gas prices are going up, and we all know that unfortunately teaching is, in at least my case, provincially regulated. So there's only so much income that we get because it's funded through taxpayers and the government. Unless you plan to move closer to that area, it may not be worthwhile. But for example, as you saw in last week's video and the week before, I am moving to a different part of my city. So I will be looking at jobs that are at different schools, not because I don't like the school where I work now, but just because my commute would be shorter. And so I would have more time in the mornings to prepare and plan and be ready for the day. And that can just ease a lot of stress as well. The third thing that I think teachers should all consider is consider who you'll be working with. So, for example, do you know the teachers in the department, or do you know the teachers who teach in that grade level at that school? Have you worked with that department head before? Do you like those teachers or that department head? Could you see yourself working well with those people? Or do you know the principals or vice principals, right? Maybe if they're people that you've worked with before, they can attest to your professionalism and how well you do as an educator, and they would be great references or job connections for you. It could give you a leg up with the administration if you already know them. But you really need to think about if you think you could work well on that team. Not many teachers transfer all at once unless there are a lot of people retiring or a lot of people on a maternity leave or medical leave or things like that. So really think about the admin team, check the website to see who might be working there. Do you know people there? Could you see yourself fitting in with that team? The fourth thing that everyone should consider is to consider the school culture or the dynamics of the building. So as an example, when you're looking at the name of a school and a job posting that becomes available, is that school known for their strong arts program and you are an arts teacher, you'd love to be a part of that? Or are they known for hosting international students and you would love to be part of the group of people that teaches international students? This may mean tailoring some of your lessons to students who are English language learners, but maybe you love that your school welcomes students from a variety of different places and celebrates diversity in a big way. Maybe this is a school that has an emphasis on academics. So for example, there are at least 2 schools in my school board that have the IB or International Baccalaureate program. If you love that kind of program, you want to teach students and really challenge them academically, really try and get them to think outside the box, have these enriching experiences through projects, field trips, extracurricular options, then maybe that's a great fit for you. Maybe you'd love to teach gifted students. Or maybe you want to go to a school because the leadership values staff feedback. And also, we want to make sure that this isn't like a performative kind of feedback. So, for example, I've heard of people complaining about how at some schools, their admin will say they value staff feedback and they'll hear them out, but then at a staff meeting, it's announced that the plan that the administration has decided on doesn't really value staff feedback because nothing's been included in the plan. So if they actually implement or include staff feedback in their planning, whether that be scheduling, or whether that be how lates or absences are dealt with, credit recovery options, all of those things are really important. That's also a great job interview question, is to ask the staff about the culture of the school if there's anything you need to know. There's a little bonus tip for you. And the fifth thing that I think every teacher should consider before transferring to a different school is their health, right? You need to consider your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual health. Is it worthwhile to teach in that school? So for example, physical health. There are some schools in my school board, including the one where I work right now, where there are no ramps and no elevators. So for example, I had a student this year who had a knee injury. He was using a walker for part of the year. And the problem with that is that he was fine for 3 out of his 4 classes, but then for math, which is normally upstairs, he has to work in a classroom downstairs by himself. And the big problem with that is that the teacher who's in the classroom while they're supervising the student, and they may be able to help with a little bit of the math work. They're not a math teacher. They don't have that qualification. So we're trying our best to help this student who can't get up the stairs right now because they're still recovering from a knee injury. But then it becomes a conversation of equity and do they have access to the resources they really need? So consider your physical health, right? What is the air quality like? What is the stairs versus elevators thing like? Some of these things we really take for granted, or they're the last thing we think about. But we should prioritize our physical, mental, and emotional health. Mental health meaning if you had, say, a short-term job filling in for a maternity leave, if you had a really bad experience with that admin team or in that building, it's okay to say, not out loud, but maybe just to yourself, I don't want to go back to that school. I really did not feel welcomed there, or I had a really negative experience. I didn't feel supported. You have every right to have that feeling and opinion. And so that can be a big consideration. You also need to think about your spiritual and emotional health, right? We all know that teaching can be draining. And yes, there are students who can make a lot of rude remarks or comments. Sometimes they're directed at us because of something we said. Even if we didn't say anything wrong, they may just be taking out their frustration on us. It could be something going on outside of the classroom, but we become the target of their anger or frustration or sadness. But at the end of the day, you need to know how drained you feel, and you don't want your emotional or mental battery to be drained completely by the end of every day. If you dread going to work every day, that's not good. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to quit the teaching profession altogether. It may not mean that you have to switch to a different school board, but maybe it does mean that a transfer to a different school could be really beneficial to your health. I hope that all of these considerations are helpful to you. If they are, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, give us a follow on Instagram, by the way, and let me know in the comments what other things you think transferring teachers should consider and what else you'd like to see on this channel. I will see you back on this channel in my new house.